Thank you, Aaliyah, and thanks everybody for joining us. As Aaliyah said, we're going to dive into what's happening in Solr 5, which is just about to be released, so it's kind of a preview of what's going on in the community. As I understand it, the release is almost done and baked. We've had a number of release candidates, so any day now the actual artifacts should be available for public consumption. In the meantime, if you'd like, you can certainly go to the Solr website and try them out from there. So with that, I'm going to dig in a little bit into Apache Solr 5. But I first wanted to start off by announcing that we have decided where the next Lucene and Solr Revolution conference is. It'll be October 13th to the 15th in Austin, Texas. Great venue, great town, great conference. Really a nice place for people to go and gather with other people interested in Lucene and Solr and share ideas and learn things about Solr and Lucene and how it can help make your life better, how it can make your job better, all of those good things. So if you're interested in that, we would love to have you. Go to the link at the bottom, lucinerevolution.org, and we look forward to joining you in Austin in October. Transitioning then into the actual talk, I wanted to start off by setting the stage a little bit about how we think about Lucene and Solr here at Lucidworks, the way we go about contributing to the project, and why we think a lot of these things that we've been working on and the community has been working on are important for the project. So first and foremost, when I think about Solr and I think about Lucidworks, I think about a number of different things coming together. We look at it as, we've got a number of committers and contributors on the team here at Solr. There's some people who work all day on Solr every day. And it's really all about these three circles here, bringing together these three different communities, if you will, around building out a first-class open source search engine. So from the community standpoint, it's about how do we drive and engage people, how do we fix the issues that come up, how do we add new features that the community wants. And then, obviously we're in the for-profit business, so being able to deliver capabilities for our customers and for our products are also obviously important. But we try to, of course, balance that with the needs across all of the system. And with that, I kind of start to think about where our vision is around search and the capabilities that are present in Solr and present in our products that build on top of Solr. And I think in many ways they go to, what this slide is talking about in a nutshell is that, in the last 3 to 4 years, search has really moved beyond just being about a search box where you type in a handful of characters or a handful of keywords and you get back 10 blue links. Obviously, there's a big business in that out on the internet for providing access to the web, but there's also a lot of people who have gone well beyond that and are using Solr and Lucene in a lot of different ways that go beyond just those simple typing in keywords into the search box. And in many ways, that evolution reflects the fact that as the amount of data that we have grows, we, of course, need more capabilities around that data. We want that data to be more personal. We want it to be more contextual. And I think most of all, we want it to be more actionable. We want to be in a better position to make some decision that is in front of us at this point in time. And so we want the data to be right there. We want it to be ranked. We want the computers to help us sift through all of the data that we have such that we can take action. What that then translates to, I think, in terms of Solr is how do we bring capabilities into Solr such that search can be smarter? How do we bring in things like location or search history or queries, the past history from the users, their current queries, what they're looking at, what they're clicking on, as well as things like security and context around where they are in the world, what they're doing, who they are, what their job is, what they've done in the past few hours, past few days. How can we combine all of those things together to provide a much more personal and contextual set of results or set of data that we can then take action on? Because at the end of it, I think we all know that search is this ultimate democratizing capability, and that we are so used to using search on the web that we want that experience across everything we do, whether it's in our personal home lives or in in the enterprise. And so with that, at Lucidworks, we really then focus on delivering products across the spectrum here, ranging from, hey, you need help in getting started with solar, or you have some hard questions you want help with, all the way up through our flagship product, Fusion, which I look at it as a product that complements and extends the capabilities of solar. In many ways, what we're aiming at for Fusion is how do we ask more interesting questions of solar? How do we get more data into solar and then use the capabilities of solar to then return results, things like recommendations along the lines of people who bought this, people who bought that, other machine learning things like named entity recognition, and so on. So that's kind of my 30,000-foot view of the world of Lucene and solar and search, and then obviously where we're headed as a company in terms of our products and the way we back the community and support the community in their efforts. So with that, then I'm going to get into more of the details around what's happening inside Apache Solr 5. First and foremost, we're going to take a look at some of the things around getting started. We've heard the community say, hey, this stuff can be easier. Let's make it easier. We've put a lot of effort in the community into making that easier out of the box, both at the getting started and running capabilities as well as the, hey, I've got data in a variety of formats. I want to put it in. And then we're going to look at some lower level features. By no means is this going to be a comprehensive view of everything that was done in Solr 5, but I'm going to hit on some highlights that I think are important and interesting in the evolution of solar. And then we're going to talk, the last few items here are all around scaling and stability and this notion of getting finished. It's one thing to get started. It's a whole other thing to get into production and stay in production and not have systems go down, especially in a large-scale distributed environment. And so we want to make sure as a community we invest in those areas as well. And then I'm going to finish off with a little bit of a sneak peek ahead of what's coming in future versions of Solar 5.1, 5.2, et cetera. Mainly this is a view, our view at Lucidworks of where we're investing as a company in terms of the community. So with that, let's dig in a little bit to the getting started. First and foremost, if you haven't tried out Solar recently, one of the cool things I think that's happened is we provide scripts out of the box to make this easy to get up and running. So you can literally just go download Solar, and it has a lot of capabilities out of the box. And so you can, whether you're on Windows or Unix or Linux, you can just simply go to the binary directory there and run start, stop, and a variety of other commands. You can create collections, et cetera, such that you have this very nice upfront getting started experience. Some of the other details around these things, as we've moved away from the web archive approach of the world, we still do underneath the hood have a notion of a web container like Jetty. But what the community has decided to do is move more towards that as being an implementation detail. This will allow us to bring in new protocols and new approaches to how we deliver results. And so you can look for the fact that in the Solr 5.0 release, there will be no more solar.war file in there. Last but not least, we've heard a lot of requests around, hey, how do I make this easy to run as a service in my data center? And so we provide scripts that you can then integrate with tools like Puppet or Chef or Ansible or other provisioning tools out there. And so again, the idea here is we want to make it as simple as possible for people to get up and get started on the system. And with that, I think we've also pushed a lot on making it such that you can get your data into the system in your way. In other words, for instance, as the CTO here at Lucidworks, I've pushed our team a lot on, hey, don't make me think about all of the settings I have in Solar when I'm just getting started. I know my data. I know the questions I want to ask of it. Let me just go push that data in and get going. So we've added a lot of capabilities, for instance, around it, supporting JSON out of the box and quote-unquote doing the right thing. The reason I highlight that as doing the right thing is because, of course, anybody who knows data knows that there's always exceptions. And so what we try to do is do the right thing for most people in most situations and treat, JSON and learn from the schema that's in JSON and make the right decisions for you while still giving you the capabilities to override that later on. And of course, JSON's great. It's all the rage with a lot of these NoSQL engines these days, except for when you really start to think about data, why should I even have to convert it to JSON in the first place if I already have it in some valid format to begin with? And so a lot of our investment is around how do we make it easier for you to just take the data that you have and shove it into Solr and start asking questions of it. So whether that's CSV or XML or rich content like Microsoft Office files or PDFs, et cetera, we want you to be able to start throwing that content at Solr within the first 5 minutes and get reasonable and meaningful results without having to go install plugins or other features and functionality that you don't have right out of the box. Along those lines, Solr 5 will be shipping the latest version of Apache Tika. For those who aren't familiar with Tika, it is a content extraction library. It provides and integrates a number of different frameworks for extracting content, for instance, from PDF files or Microsoft Word or PowerPoint or Keynote or images, et cetera. It's a great standalone Apache project. It's been integrated in with Solr for a number of years now. I think it's interesting that, with Tika 1.7, we've added OCR support such that you can now take in images and find and extract the content out of that, the word content out of that, the language content out of that. It's also added support for things like PST files, MATLAB, and a number of other file formats. You can go to the Tika website and learn more about that if you want. A few other things along the way, we continue to invest in how do we better deal with dates, how do we better deal with spatial capabilities, and so on and so forth. So again, at the end of the day, the kind of underwriting theme of all of this is your content, your way. Don't make me do a lot of work that I don't need to when I'm first getting started and as I evolve with my system. Digging in a little bit, drilling into some of the exciting new features that are underlying all of this stuff. One of the biggest ones I think that we've been working quite a bit on here at Lucidworks has to do with, at the end of the day, slicing and dicing your data in interesting ways or different ways. If you've been using Solr for a long time, there's a lot of different ways you can facet on data. If you're not familiar with faceting, this is the thing that you see on most e-commerce sites where if you search for TV, down the left-hand side, you'll see, things like it'll say there's 25 Sony TVs and 13 Samsungs and so on and so forth. What we've tried to do in Solr 5 is make a lot more capabilities along those lines, as well as integrate the ability to ask statistical questions of the facets. So like you can see here on the right-hand side, for instance, we're starting off by faceting on the author field in this particular data set. You can see there's 42 results. And then you can start to see that I'm actually calculating statistics on the price of those books. So this is a book or movie index that we're looking at here. And so you can start to calculate things like what is the minimum and maximum and average values for the price by those authors. And of course, there's lots of different ways that you can slice and dice this data. And really, this is the beginning of a number of steps that we've been working on to bring together all of the different ways of faceting into one unified approach that allows you to ask interesting questions on the fly using faceting and stats. If you want to learn more, go to the lucidworks.com blog. And Chris Hofstetter, as many of you know, Haas, has put up an excellent article introducing these things called You Got Your Stats in My Facets. So you can go and dig in and learn more there. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later on when we take a sneak peek at the roadmap. The next thing that we've been working on quite a bit is really making it easy for people to programmatically interact with Solr. Solr schema and config are great for the ways of are version controlling your configuration. I can't tell you the number of times where you go into a customer, they version control those things. It allows them to know and understand across their whole organization, not just the developers, what exactly the settings are in the application. But the flip side is developers have been asking for more and more controls over how those results or how those configuration files get generated. They want to be able to programmatically change them at runtime. And so as you can see here, we've added a number of APIs that help you do that. The schema API in particular allows you to now add field types and dynamic fields. It allows you, it has for a while actually allowed you to add fields programmatically. We're continuing to flesh out some of those here in the upcoming versions. We've also added the ability now to manage all of your request handlers through APIs, such that if you want to add, your parameters that Solr uses as defaults or invariants or appends and things like that, you can do that now through the APIs. You can add and take away request handlers as you see fit. We've also taken away some of the verbosity of the configuration file, in the sense that a number of handlers that everybody uses all the time are just implicitly registered. You don't even have to think about setting up the admin configuration or any of those kinds of things. They just always ship with Solr. And then last but not least, more and more APIs around helping people deal with and work with their collections programmatically. So if you want to move collections around, if you want to balance them out, if you want to split shards, et cetera, there's a lot of APIs at the collection layer about helping you manage your data in a way that's meaningful for you. Digging in just a little bit deeper, for those of you who aren't familiar, Lucene is the Java library that is underpinning Solr. So Solr provides Lucene as a service, as well as the distributed capabilities and a lot more. One of the cool things about the way the project is set up is any of the changes or many of the changes that happen in Lucene just automatically benefit the Solr community as well. So some of these top-level things here, like stronger index safety guarantees, making sure that the index truly cannot get corrupted regardless of what happens in your data center or on your computer, such that we can always recover from that. We've been making a lot of improvements along those things. And of course, as data sizes are growing, memory usage becomes more and more of a premium, so we continuously are working to reduce the memory usage. This really goes across a number of areas in the system. I'll give you a pointer to the release notes later on, so that you can go and dig into some of these yourself. For those of you who have done other customizations or leveraged some of the lower level parts of Lucene, things like the field cache have been replaced with a new approach that you could use to take advantage of the field cache or similar functionality as part of sorting or faceting or other kinds of things. And then we've also added a number of new ways around sorting and doing autocomplete or suggestors, which make it easier for you to deal with data in a multi-valued environment. Last but not least, a couple of essentially I/O performance level capabilities. Lucene will now detect when you're using a solid-state drive, as I understand it, and can choose better defaults for getting higher performance on SSDs. And then last but not least, the good people working on this have figured out some ways to deal with large data movement when merging the indexes underneath the hood. If all of that's Greek to you, don't worry about it. Solr ships this stuff for you out of the box, and just simply by upgrading, you can take advantage of many of these things. Thinking then about the promise of going big, we've with Solr 4, we introduced Solr Cloud, which gave us full-scale distributed capabilities, leveraging Apache Zookeeper as the distributed coordination engine. We continue to invest a lot of time and energy in making sure that this scales and meets the needs of the most demanding applications. So companies that are using Solr, for instance, have reported they have 200, 300 billion documents in Solr, and it does just fine at scale with hundreds, if not thousands, of nodes. But yet there's some tweaks that we can always do to make sure this stuff is working the way it should be. Digging in a little bit, if you saw the keynotes at Lucene Revolution from Shalin and Jessica, you no doubt saw them talk a lot about how to manage large-scale multi-tenanted environments. In this particular case, we've done a lot of work around the performance of the way Solr interacts with Zookeeper to reduce the chattiness involved in monitoring the states of collections or the states of the data in the system. We've also worked a lot on the performance of that system, as well as just, more sane timeout values such that they better reflect what's going on in the real world. I would encourage you to follow through, and once the slides are released here, put up a link to Xiaolin's keynote on YouTube. If you just go and search for Xiaolin Lucene Solr Revolution 2014, I'm sure that will come up as well. At the feature level in scale, we've heard for a while now that people want to have more control over the way Lucene does scoring in large-scale distributed environments. This is often known as the distributed IDF problem, or the distributed inverse document frequency problem. If you're not familiar with document frequency, I like to think of it as the yin and yang of search. It works with term frequency to do the heavy lifting around deciding whether a particular term or particular word is important or not. So for instance, in a document, the word "the" may occur a lot, so it has a high term frequency, and so you would think it's important, but of course we all know the word "the" in the English language occurs in pretty much every document, which means it has a very high document frequency, which then the two of those combined, the term frequency and the inverse document frequency, work together to balance out the importance of a term and scoring. That being said, a long-winded way of explaining what IDF is, we've now added the ability to share those statistics across a cluster such that you can better deal with anomalies you might have in the way your data is distributed. There's a number of different implementations here that you can choose from depending on your use cases. I would encourage you to go and read the documentation a bit more on this. And of course, there will be trade-offs for you in terms of memory and performance and those kinds of things. So dig in on the documentation, or if you have a Lucidworks developer support subscription or above, we are more than happy to sit down and talk with you about some of the implications of this in your application. Last but not least, I think ease of use and ease of getting started is great. We want to make all of the products as fast and as easy to get going as possible. But I don't know about you. I would rather spend a little bit extra time up front dealing with learning something, knowing that I'm going to be more stable in production later on, than have something that's easy, somewhat easier to begin with, and then it constantly crashing. So we've spent a lot of work on simulating network partitions, data loss, et cetera. In other words, we've spent a lot of time with our customers and in our internal labs and with the community focused on the real world. And, one of the ways that we've done that, there's a great blog that Xiaolin has put out on our blog about called Call Me Maybe. It's based off of a project called Jepsen. If you're working on large-scale distributed environments, I would encourage you to go check out Jepsen and see what it can do for your application. We took Jepsen and we ran Solr Cloud through all of those things, or many of the scenarios in Jepsen that are tested for, and we came out in pretty good working order out of that. So much so that the author of Jepsen, many people know him as Affer, came out and tweeted, want to repeat how impressed I am with Lucidworks testing of Solr Cloud and how well it behaved. And I think that's really a testament to the architectural decisions that the community has made around leveraging Zookeeper and leveraging the tried and true capabilities therein to make sure that we scale very well and we stay up and running and we coordinate appropriately when we have loss in the environment. So with all of that, that's the kind of the getting finished side. We've made a number of other stability improvements as well. We've added some security capabilities around Zookeeper itself, such that you can set up access controls on what parts of the Zookeeper information that Solr leverages are available to what people. We've also added some capabilities around the sharing of data between nodes such that you can throttle the bandwidth usage if you so like. And then the last few things here, the timeouts, of course, are, meant to keep things sane in an environment that maybe goes haywire from time to time. And then last but not least, we've added more control over long-running queries. A number of our customers have queries that have 10, 20, 30,000 query terms or K of terms, I should say query terms there, sorry. They have 4, 5K, 10K long queries. They want to be able to short circuit those, and so we've added a number of capabilities along those lines such that you can have more predictable and reliable results. So that's really a quick tour of the highlights. I wanted to spend a slide or two just thinking about what's coming in the future. Obviously, we're really excited about Solr 5. We're really excited about the getting started features and the stability features and in particular the pivots and facets. And so I wanted to explore a little bit more where we are digging in. For those of you not familiar, I've added in the Solr JIRA issues, the issue tracking numbers that we use to keep track of when and how these things are going to be contributed to the community. So I've tried to add those in for the ones that I know offhand. First and foremost, I think, we as a company are investing a lot of our time and resources around how do I slice and dice my data better, and then how do I make sure it's performing and scalable, and how do I make sure that I have total control over Solr. So, the first few bullet points here, continuing this march towards the facets and analytics all being a part of one system so that you can do, for instance, range queries and date faceting and all of these things all hanging off of pivots. And then you can ask all kinds of different statistical questions of that data. And then we are adding in support for percentiles as well. We're using Ted Dunning's Key Digest library there, which is a great little library for doing a lot of that stuff. And then, the next few bullet points really focused in on performance. We've found some areas in the replication process that we think we can improve in terms of the way a leader in a distributed system talks to its worker nodes. And so we're working on it, improving that performance. As well as I mentioned earlier, there's a number of things around making sure that we can programmatically control all of the configuration. So, for instance, if you want to set your merge factor or you want to change the size of the cache, etc., you can do that programmatically if you want, because that will let you then dynamically react to changing environments in your system. The last bullet point, first-class support for more languages. Java has always kind of had this special place among the clients for Solr. We are working on adding first-class support. We will be donating clients back to the community here for C-based languages as well as other languages. That will be obviously a longer-term thing, but we are trying to get all of the clients baked into the distribution itself, or at least very closely associated, such that they are, well maintained by the community. And I've skipped over the second to last bullet point because I think this one is in particular interesting in that what we are seeing more and more out of our customers and in the community is people wanting to ask questions across different indexes, and they want to join data between different systems. We all know that we live in a polyglot world here. We live in a world with a lot of different systems up and running. So, for instance, you might have Mongo or Cassandra or Redis or whatever other system up and running. And then you've also got Solr up and running, Hadoop, et cetera. We want to make it easier and easier to share data between those systems while still taking advantage of data locality such that we're not constantly shipping data across the network. And so one of the areas we're investing in here is the ability to bring in a data location-aware value source such that we can deal with fast-changing distributed data in a more effective way. So what does all of that mean? If you're not familiar with what a value source is essentially a thing that backs faceting and function queries, and essentially allows you to, at runtime or at query time, include elements of a particular document as part of your scoring or as part of your filters and all of those kinds of things. And so by bringing in a value source that essentially connects to an external system like another collection, we can now update that value source dynamically, such that, for instance, if you calculate some value about a document, let's say you calculate an offline scoring factor like a page rank or some other boost factor, you can update just that third-party part of it and then incorporate it via this distributed value source in such a way that you can then leverage it in scoring on your main content. If you're familiar with Lucidworks Fusion and you're familiar with our concept of signals, this dovetails very nicely with the fact that I've got a bunch of signals that I've calculated offline via Spark or via Solr, and I want to bring them into my scoring at runtime. So those really are the near-term roadmap ideas. Of course, there are a lot of other things that we can and will be doing, and I'm sure in future webinars we will be covering those as well. So with that, I'm going to leave you with a couple of resources, namely in terms of the release notes as well as links to how to get a hold of me as well as a hold of Lucidworks. And with that, I think we have time for a few questions.
Yep, so we will now begin the Q&A portion of the session. Just a reminder, if we do not get to your question during the live broadcast, someone from the Lucidworks team will contact you directly. So the first question for you, Grant, is when we make changes to the schema or Solr config via the new APIs, will we need to reload the Solr core? Will we need to reindex?
That's a great question. As I understand it, no, you do not. The whole reloading of that takes place automatically for you. I'll have to double check the documentation on it. I did not implement that particular feature. As for the reindexing question, it really depends on what you're doing. Like if, for instance, you're changing the field type or the way that future content is going to be indexed, if you want all of your prior data to reflect that latest view of analysis, then yes, you will need to reindex. We don't go back in and rewrite all of the documents for you. So in other words, any change you make to that schema is from that point forward. If you want your old content to reflect that, you then need to go back and reindex that. And that's really how Lucene has worked for a long, long period of time, right? It's always kind of forward-looking. It's not going back and changing those.
Okay. So how easy will it be to migrate from Solr 4.x to Solr 5.x? Are 4.x configurations or indexes compatible with 5.x? Or will I need to modify my existing configurations and reindex my documents?
So that's a great question. I mean, I think some of it will depend. We obviously help a lot of customers with upgrades. The cop-out answer is it depends. The better answer is the community does work hard to make sure that the last version of a particular major release is compatible. That the next major release is compatible with the last release of the previous one in terms of its ability to read in the index and all of those kinds of things. You of course have to, once you make that change, such as Solr 5 is reading your Solr 4 indexes, it's going to upgrade those indexes for you. Such that there's no going backwards. This gets especially interesting when you're in a distributed environment, so you want to make sure that you do your migration in an appropriately timed way. We certainly can help with that in terms of the timing, and I'm sure there's documentation on the reference guide around how to do that. Other things will really depend on what customizations you made. Probably one of the biggest things for people is that we have changed the way that you start and stop Solr. You can still, of course, go create your own lore, and I believe, that's pretty straightforward to do in terms of the way we're shipping now with Jetty embedded in the start process as opposed to being go grab the war and drop it into Tomcat and or Jetty on your own. So those will be some of the changes in terms of how you start things. As for the index itself, there's always a lot of little things that one should check there in terms of making sure that the system is consistent with how you expect it to behave. And of course, at the end of the day, make backups, test, and all of those good things. We try to make sure we do it in the same way, but it is software.
Great. The next question. Will we see any major performance gains in moving from Solr 4.x to 5.x?
Performance gains, I think, there are some in there. I highlighted some of them as part of Lucene. I don't have a comprehensive list of all of them right off the top of my head, but almost always there are performance gains. I know we are working on additional performance gains in terms of the replication side of things. We obviously get a lot of the Lucene ones out of the box. I know there's been some other tweaks in Solr as well towards performance. But again, it really is going to depend on what parts of Solr you're using. I mentioned, for instance, we've increased in the Zookeeper, the way we talk with Zookeeper. I mentioned the overseer performance there, the way Solr talks between its nodes via Zookeeper. There's been a lot of performance improvements there. So those of you in a distributed environment should see some there as well. Beyond that, I'd have to dig in at a lot lower layer because I don't know off the top of my head the implications of everything that we've fixed in terms of performance.
Next question. Is there an option to run Solr 5 on Tomcat? If we're currently running Solr 4 on Tomcat, what will be the best way to migrate?
Yeah, that's a good question. I believe there is documentation on this in the reference guide. If not, we can add it. But I'm pretty sure some of the people on the team here have added that. As my understanding of it, underneath the hood, we're still launching Jetty. Jetty has a web apps container, and underneath there is essentially an exploded version of a war. It's not a war anymore, shipped as a war, but it's just the whole directory structure. So as I understand it, you should be able to take and build a war out of that and then drop it into Tomcat. But I would have to double check on that just to be certain.
Will OCR support the out of the box? Will it be as simple as uploading an image, or will we have to do more?
So with the Tika improvement, I know I started the work on the Tika OCR. What it does is it uses an open source project called Tesseract, which is a machine learning based approach to OCR. I do not believe it is turned on out of the box. I know Tesseract is a third party install that you have to do. So for instance, if you're on Red Hat or some other distribution, you can do a yum install or an apt-get install from the repository of Tesseract, and then I do believe there is some configuration involved there. But to be honest, I haven't looked at it since it was finalized, so I don't know what the out-of-the-box configuration values are. That's certainly something we could follow up on.
With the new schema and config APIs, will we still have to place configuration files at a specific place on disk?
That's a great question. You've always had the ability to move Solr home around and Solr conf around, so I don't know that you've ever had to have them. You've had to have them in specific relative locations, I guess. Underneath the hood, I think, what's happening in here is the move is away from essentially the XML and the schema XML and the config XML are becoming implementation details, just like Jetty is becoming an implementation detail. And so I do believe they get put into specific relative locations, but I still think you have control over that. But to be honest, it's something I'd have to look up more details on.
Will rolling upgrades be possible in Solr 5? Will we be able to perform a rolling upgrade from Solr 4 to Solr 5?
I believe so, yes. We have customers who we test rolling upgrades with as well between minor versions. I believe that will be possible with 5 as well.
What is the estimated release date for Solr 5?
The eternal question around release dates. As I understand it, there are release candidates underway right now. The votes are taking place, so it should literally be any day unless somebody finds a major blocker that needs to be fixed.
Okay, Solr is generally a CP system. Are there any thoughts on a more AP-focused approach for Solr?
Right, so for people who aren't familiar with the CAP theorem here, CP, consistency and partitioning versus availability and partitioning. Generally speaking, yes, Solr is a CP system. We do try to use heuristics in appropriate places where we can be more focused on availability. That being said, Zookeeper tends to be more towards the consistency side of things, and that's been our focus. There are, of course, trade-offs for people who really care about their data and don't want data loss, et cetera. The CP system is the way to go. For those people who just want things to kind of be up and available, they want to favor availability, but they can deal with results being out of sync and things like that, then the AP approach. I'm not aware of specific things beyond, we've added some capabilities to try to make for availability out of the box, but I'm not aware of any other major efforts to make, for instance, the Zookeeper stuff pluggable at this point in time, such that you could use a different coordinator, et cetera. So.
We've heard rumors that master-slave will be discontinued in Solr 5. Will master-slave replication be removed in Solr 5?
Wow, I can't speak for the community on that one. My personal view is that, Solr Cloud should just be called Solr, and that, one node or 2 node master worker configuration is just a simpler case of, a single shard with multiple replicas, and such that everything should just be Solr Cloud-based approach. As to whether that's been finalized in the community, I don't believe it has, and I don't know if it ever will. It certainly would simplify things in some cases for people, but we also know there's a lot of people out there who are just set up to scale out for query volume, and master worker is a perfectly good way of doing that. But, that being said, you do lose some of the collection capability and the ability to switch if you ever need to. So our personal take at Lucidworks is just set up and run in Solr Cloud mode. And if you only have enough data for one shard, then just replicate it out using Solr Cloud, because who knows what's going to happen in the future in terms of growth.
With the new schema and Solr config APIs, will changes made through the APIs be persisted on disk?
Yes, they are. Well, they're persisted in Zookeeper and Solr Cloud mode, and then on disk for those ones, for when it's not Solr Cloud mode.
Are there any spatial improvements in the roadmap? I've heard some things about spatial heat maps in 5.1.
Yeah, I believe David Smiley and a few other people are working on those. I've seen tweets and blogs and Jira issues around spatial heat maps, so I believe those are going to be going in. I myself haven't followed up on them specifically, but I do see, in fact, that David posted in the chat room that you may want to mention spatial heat maps coming to 5.1. So there's your answer, yes.
Are there any efforts to better visualize cache utilization?
I think they're asking some more information there around what's going on with the cache. So, I think, in terms of the Solr UI, yeah, it would certainly be nice to have greater details on what's in the cache and the life of any particular item in that and things like that. I'm not aware of any out of the box. I do know one of the things that we are looking at is more controls over the caches in terms of not just being based off of number of documents, but also being based off of size and other properties. So there perhaps will be some level of effort on caches here in the near future. So if you have a particular thing you want, it'd be great for you to add in a JIRA issue into Solr now, and perhaps we can get to that. That being said, I can't say it's at the top of our personal priority list, but that's the beauty of having a community backing your project. Somebody else may want to work on that.
Could you say a few words about schemaless support in Solr 5?
Schemaless support, so schemaless has been in Solr for a while now. We actually, I think, prefer the word data-driven. I very rarely ever worked on data that doesn't have some form of schema. JSON, of course, has the schema implied when it's coming in. I think there's been a lot of work on, in particular, dealing with JSON, dealing with the nested structures within JSON to create the appropriate nested structures in Solr for doing things like nested documents and block joins and all of those kinds of things. Our goal there, so Solr supports essentially two different approaches to data-driven guessing of data. One is the dynamic field approach, which has been in Solr for a long time, which is you use the convention of the field name telling Solr what type of data to expect. More recently, we added this notion of field guessing, where we actually inspect the value of the data and say, oh, that looks like a number, let me treat that as a number. That looks like a string, let me treat that as a string. Our end goal here, like I said at the beginning, is we want you to be able to deal with your data in your way. And so we want to make reasonable guesses based off of the likelihood that this data is a number or a field or a latitude and longitude, such that we do the right thing for most people out of the box, right? Or do a reasonable thing for most people out of the box. And then as they get more familiar with Solr, naturally you're going to want to tweak that, and eventually when you get to production, you're going to, in all likelihood, lock that down to a very specific schema such that you can deal with bad data more appropriately if it should come into your system.
Are there any improvements related to lots of cores in Solr Cloud, specifically around large-scale deployments?
Yeah, so I would encourage people to go watch Shaolin's YouTube video. There's been a lot of work on multi-tenanted situations. There's still more that can be done in terms of isolation and all of that, but a lot of strides in terms of the way Solr deals with multiple cores, as well as the ability to do joins across those. Don't really have the time here to go into depth on all of them, but there are a lot of capabilities there, and I think it's again, it speaks to what more and more people are doing with search, such that this is an area of investment in the community as well as with us as a company.
Are there any improvements related to faceting performance across large numbers of documents in large Solr deployments?
That's a great question. I believe I saw some JIRA issues go by on this recently. I do not recall them offhand, but I think as always, we're looking for better ways of doing this.
Great. You mentioned just CSV, JSON, and XML formats. Will the older response write formats be continued in Solr 5?
Yes, those are all, as far as I understand, is still available. I was just kind of highlighting that, what we're trying for here is for you to deal with your data in the format you already have it in, right? And then you can go and, of course, dig in at a deeper level if you need to.
What is the role of DIH in Solr 5 moving forward?
DIH, the data import handler, for those who aren't familiar with it, is essentially a way of connecting to databases and other JDBC-based databases and other repositories of information. I know there's just been, incremental improvement to it in terms of bug fixes and things like that. I'm not aware of any decision one way or another to remove or add to it, other than just to keep and continue adding to it. So I may have missed something in the community there, but as far as I know, it's still present and accounted for and working.
Will Solr 5 support more performant partial document/atomic updates?
Wow, great question. This is probably a question that's been happening in Lucene and Solr land since almost the day that Lucene was invented, perhaps. The underlying issue here is that when you do a delete or when you update a document, what happens underneath the hood is you do a delete and then an add of the new document. Just based off of the way the index structures are, this ends up being very, very efficient. If you understand how an inverted index works or how postings list works, it's actually quite hard to just do an inline update of a document. There have been various designs in the community over the years as to how to address this, but nobody has ever taken it on. And I don't think it's ever been clear, at least to me and from what I understand of most people I talk to, that there is a clear win here in terms of trying to implement something more complicated that would make this possible out of the box. Many people often think, oh, delete and add, that's going to be really expensive. And while, yes, it is more operations, it often is not that expensive. That being said, there are parts that are becoming more updatable, things like doc values. I also talked about that value source capability that we're going to be working on that will add additional capabilities there. But for general text fields, for instance, I think it's still a really hard problem, and it's not a clear win as to how you would make that updatable as far as I understand it. Now, perhaps somebody else has a better way that I'm not aware of, but for now, that's my understanding.
Are there any plans to integrate more semantic analysis into Solr 5 or Fusion?
That's a great question. So semantic analysis, we're trying to get at, kind of deeper meaning behind what a document is about or what a question is about, doing more conceptual level matching, perhaps using techniques like LDA or LSI or other kinds of approaches. Lucene itself supports a number of different scoring models at its core, such that it's really easy to plug in new approaches to similarity. So there definitely is an opening there for people. At the Solr level, we do ship with UEMA support out of the box. We ship with support for things like caret squared, et cetera. Some of those can then be leveraged to build out higher level, semantic processing on the data. As for Fusion, yes, this is definitely a part of our roadmap. We have some capabilities in already in terms of pipeline stages that allow people to bring in natural language processing and other things for and machine learning for doing deeper analysis of both documents and queries. And so some of those are available now and some of those will be available in the near future.
Will there be any benchmarking tools to measure performance on my environment, such as CPU usage, memory usage, profiling, and other metrics?
So Solr does ship with a number of low-level metrics, that you can just get to from the admin. We are also looking at very closely of adding in things like code halo metrics, et cetera. We personally also use the Solr Scale Toolkit quite a bit for benchmarking at scale. If you're not familiar with that, if you go to the Lucidworks GitHub home, github.com/Lucidworks, and then I think it's just SSTK or Solr Scale Toolkit. Quite a bit of tools that leverage Amazon and Lucidworks Silk to go out and build large-scale distributed clusters and then gather information around their performance. Also just a great tool for simply deploying on Amazon. As for other tools, I mean, I think, you know, there's a lot of great tools out there for profiling and digging into where performance bottlenecks are. We definitely would be interested in other people's ideas around how we can measure and monitor that stuff. I know we are also, you know, as part of the replication performance work that I mentioned earlier, we are working on standardizing on a shareable benchmarking system that can just be a part of the community, much like the Lucene benchmarking capability is.
So this will be the last question. Again, if we did not get to your question today, expect a note from someone on the Lucidworks team shortly. So the last question is, will update by query be supported in Solr 5?
You give me a tough one. To be honest, I don't know. So they want to be able to send in a document with a query and say they want to just update all of the documents that have that match that particular query. Brad, I'm not sure. I see your question there in the window. I'm not sure fully I understand what it is you're asking about. So perhaps maybe we could take one more, Aaliyah, and then I can stay on. And if Brad wants to clarify in the chat window, we can go from there.
Okay, perfect. So then the last question is there an official Docker of Solr 5?
Official Docker of Solr 5, as in being community maintained, I do not believe there is. I'm literally having a meeting with somebody on my team tomorrow about Docker. So, you know, you can, I think, look for Docker support here in the near future, and that's certainly something we are interested in at Lucidworks. So we'll either do it via our GitHub or we will do it and donate it back to the community. Great questions,
so
Bill.
We're just about out of time. Again, thank you all for joining us today, and for those of you who stuck around till the end, thank you. Just a reminder, anyone who signed up for the webinar will receive a link to the recording shortly. So thanks again, and we hope you enjoyed the webinar.
Thank you.